The SWIFT network is one of the largest players in global remittances and money transfers over the last 50 years, and they're about to get their lunch eaten as blockchain technology has already made leaps and bounds when it comes to speed, time to finality or settlement, transactional costs, and transparency. As one user on X even shared that SWIFT is dead in a key report that he shared from Deutsche Bank, and their position on SWIFT, as well as how they're going to move forward using crypto and DLT or distributed ledger technology. And many on the forefront of this wave believe that players like Ripple and XRP will not only dominate this new financial system, but completely flip SWIFT on their heads because they're either going to adopt the tech or get left behind. Now, over the years, there has been much speculation that Ripple and SWIFT were in private talks or in partnership, but after much digging myself and doing hundreds of videos on this channel, specifically covering XRP, I try to share the best possible information and the facts. I have yet to find credible evidence of these claims, as even if you go to literally any one of the LLMs, they will say there is no confirmed partnership between Ripple and SWIFT. There is a ton of speculation and a ton of random articles online. They get clicks, they get shared, but there is no formal, credible evidence either from Ripple or SWIFT that they are in partnership. And in all fairness, why would they be in business together when they are more likely competitors and would service the same clientele? One where SWIFT already owns the majority stake. In other words, SWIFT doesn't want to give that up or share in that profit or revenue. But still, Ripple poses a threat, and SWIFT knows this, which has lit a fire under their butts to move fast and get all of their client banks to modernize their infrastructure and adopt the new ISO 20022 standard, which is just essentially a messaging communication, which is essentially just a data-rich form of new communication that does make things more effective and efficient when sending money. Now, again, as a side note, SWIFT introduced this standard in March of 2023 alongside their old MT standard. However, in November of this year, that is set to end, and they want to modernize and get everyone on board with the ISO 20022 standard alongside the Fed, which is modernizing their infrastructure as well on the FedNow payment system. On the other hand, XRP can settle any transaction in between 3 to 5 seconds flat for fractions of a penny. And again, I found this directly on Ripple's website, so it is verified. Whereas with SWIFT, you can refer directly to their website and their yearly reports. And again, their times for settlement are all over the place, even with the new ISO 20022 standard, which will improve their business model. It will not set the precedent moving forward. In other words, over the last 50 years, SWIFT has dominated the business of global money transfers, and now it looks like things are going to change, as another titan will fall at the mercy of fast movers and innovators like Ripple Labs. This is just the natural order of things. Look at all the business titans of industry. They become slow to innovate because of committees, and they become slaves to conventional wisdom. They become lazy because they're at the pinnacle and have nothing new or exciting to reach for, which creates arrogance. That's where they miss things. They lose their edge in recognizing new opportunities and technologies. Look at Henry Ford and the Ford Motor Company. At one point, they revolutionized the world in the form of automobiles and transformation. Now just a fraction of what they used to be and struggling to become actually profitable. Or look at Blockbuster. Nobody could touch them in the movie distribution space, but they couldn't see the writing on the wall with the advent of streaming, and in came Netflix. So in this video, we will cover some interesting news surrounding SWIFT and why XRP is likely set to dominate, as well as some breaking news on Coinbase announcing new institutional assets. And of course, the latest from Stuart Alderodi, the chief legal officer over at Ripple, in their final drafts between Ripple and the SEC in coming to an agreement to resolve the case once and for all. Finally, if you haven't already had a chance, head on over to the Bull Runners HQ on Twitter or X and check out the post where we are hosting a live giveaway every single week. On Sunday, we will announce one winner for our $100 worth of XRP giveaway. Last week, it was this gentleman, and this week it could actually be you. You only need to do 3 things in order to enter. First, you need to like this pinned post in the comments down below. Then comment XRP and sign up for a Blowfin account using our link, where you can also get a 10% bonus. Every single week, the winner will be announced in our daily email newsletter, and you can subscribe to that by clicking on this link right here. Again, you'll find all of this and the instructions at Bull Runners HQ on Twitter or X. Follow the steps below. Subscribe to get altcoin secrets, which you will unlock 23 secrets to becoming a crypto millionaire. So either way, you get the free ebook no matter what, even if you don't win. And you'll also get free 10% deposit bonus for up to 50K over on Blowfin. In other words, if you deposit 50K, you'll get $5,000 directly attributed to your futures account. So it's a really good deal. And right now, we only have about 63 people that have actually liked the post, which means your odds of winning this are relatively high. Every single week, we're going to announce it. This Sunday, we'll announce it, and the time is running out. So go ahead and get to that. And as always, my friend, if you're feeling blessed and bullish, comment 777. And if you're going to be the wealthiest person in your family tree, smash the subscribe button. Hello and welcome back to the channel, my friend. If you're new here, my name is Paul, and you can find me on Twitter or X at PauliDeFi, PauliEDEFI. I did do a bit of digging into this post shared directly from the Black Swan Capitalist over on X, where he's basically stating that Swift is dead. And in this issued statement, I'm not too sure if it was a press release. I'm not too sure if it was a report. I'm actually having a hard time finding it, although it seems that when I actually plug this into Grok or ChatGPT, they are sharing some sources and information, but not the exact or direct article. So that said, they are also mentioning that this was likely put out sometime in 2024. Either way, it doesn't seem to be fake, which is why I'm reading it and sharing it with you, because there's just too much fake information out there. And we want to stay on top of the ball here and share the best possible information with you guys, which is why you're on this channel. Now, Deutsche Bank has publicly expressed an intention to explore applications in blockchain payments, transfers of asset ownership, and smart contracts. In other words, they're really going to go all in on blockchain because this seems to be the future. Now, what's really cool about this statement is the fact that any one bank is going to struggle to establish a standardized blockchain network of its own. So many of these institutional players like Bank of America or JP Morgan Chase or Credit Suisse will likely have their own DLT or distributed ledger technology running in the back end. That might be for internal use, but at the end of the day, they still all use companies like Swift in order to move money between different institutions. It makes their lives a heck of a lot easier. They don't have to service that infrastructure, and ultimately it is the same form of communication across the board, and it doesn't matter what assets you're trading in. So there's just too many issues that could occur when you're running something like that, which is why it's helpful to have a business doing it for you while you do your business of being an actual bank. See, when it comes to blockchain companies like Ripple, they're not trying to be a bank, although they are going to custodian a bunch of crypto, and although they do have a stable coin, and they will get involved in the real world assets game, and although they have an actual cryptocurrency, at the end of the day, their game is going to be creating and servicing the technologies for these types of banks. The banks are there to service clients and customers when it comes to their money. Completely different business models, which is why it's so important that they actually use a blockchain network instead of old, outdated MT money transfer systems like Swift or Bolero. Now, Swift is updating their infrastructure to ISO 222, which is essentially just a more data-rich and faster way to move money. In other words, it is just way better than the old system that they're currently running on. Now, in April of 2024, Swift asked 175 financial institutions on its network of their 11,000, which might not all use them all the time. It's just that many of these use Swift at some point in time throughout the year to transfer quadrillions of dollars, whether they would actually meet the November 2025 deadline, where everything is going to be updated into this new standard. All indicated that they were on track, which, if correct, could represent a shift of 86% of cross-border payment instructions to their new standard. And here's where things get interesting, as Svetlana Nankova, the global head of sales and institutional cash and trade finance over at Deutsche Bank, basically stated that although the new standard is way better than the old standard and their processing has a better or higher ratio of transactions and speed, at the end of the day, achieving scale is easier said than done, and adopting the new ISO 20022 standard still poses significant challenges. Why? Because the cost of the adoption of ISO for payments is a lot bigger than many banks can handle, even if the big banks can absorb those costs, because the big banks are usually the most profitable. In other words, the smaller financial institutions are struggling because this is a costly exercise that requires a lot of internal change. So although you always hear often that the ISO 20022 standard is great and that a lot of cryptos are on that standard, that simply means that yes, you can communicate or send money on or crypto on that standard, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it has anything to do with how much is going to be sent and how much fees are going to be earned and whether or not companies are even going to want to. And ultimately, I don't see why I would send XRP on that new ISO 222 standard when I can simply send XRP on the XRP ledger. And by the way, because blockchain is far more transparent and efficient and cost effective, many of these smaller financial institutions will no longer struggle when it comes to modernizing their financial infrastructure using the XRPL and Ripple technology, especially when it's actually a lot more cheap and the time to settlement is even faster and predictable, between 3 to 5 seconds. I see no situation or circumstance where virtually every single major institutional player is going to have to adopt some form of blockchain technology. Many of them are going to need to be on a global standard, and one of the only companies that I can see 10 years from now being able to service these companies or banks at scale will likely be Ripple, using the XRPL. And so whether or not Swift completely gets demolished in the future, one thing is for sure: Ripple and XRP are likely going to continue to gain steam, gain adoption, and onboard many institutions, whether it's through their stablecoin RLUSD or to use their DLT or just the XRPL. But what the most likely outcome is not that they're going to replace Swift, although I do believe Swift will lose market dominance over time. It's that Ripple and XRP will likely coexist and carve out a niche in areas where speed, cost efficiency, and innovation are critical. And by the way, in virtually all situations and circumstances into the future, innovation is always critical, and the most cost-efficient solutions win as long as it's a good technology. In other news, we now have Coinbase announcing a new institutional asset, and that would be their Coinbase or CB wrapped tokens like Cardano, Dogecoin, Litecoin, and XRP. In other words, if you're an institutional player, many of you watching this channel likely aren't. However, because Coinbase is so deeply entrenched in the institutional side of things, considering they're the ones that are custodians to a lot of these ETFs and hold the Bitcoin for companies like BlackRock, as BlackRock is now the largest ETF in the world with their IBIT ETF. At the end of the day, now they're going to offer XRP to a lot of their institutional clients as well through their Coinbase wrapped XRP, which is basically going to be an XRP to XRP equivalent. When you buy their CBXRP, you're essentially buying their XRP. These are a part of Coinbase's CB asset program designed to offer secure tokenized exposure to major crypto assets, again, backed one-to-one. In other words, you're just buying XRP, but this is really big because they're going to be offering it to their institutional clients. And in our final news, Stuart Alderodi, the chief legal officer over at Ripple, had to put a statement out because people were a bit up in arms considering the fact that over and over and over again, everyone believes that this case is over with the SEC, and essentially it is, even though Judge Torres has denied a motion for indicative ruling, which is just a bunch of legal jargon that if jurisdiction were restored to her court, the court would deny the party's motion as procedurally improper. In other words, the motion was that Ripple put a $125 million in an escrow to be paid out to the SEC in their settlement. The SEC and Ripple came to an agreement that they would only pay $50 million and get $75 million back. Judge Torres comes out and says, I would deny their motion as procedurally improper. Right now, both the SEC and Ripple want this case to be over. Paul Atkins, Brad Garlinghouse, everyone. But the judge is just making things slightly difficult. And so Stuart had to come out and basically state that nothing in today's order, which just happened yesterday, changes Ripple's wins, like XRP not being a security. This is about procedural concerns, just the procedure in which things are being done with the dismissal of Ripple's cross appeal. In other words, this thing truly is over. It's just we didn't want people to get scared, so we're going to talk about it, right? Ripple and the SEC are fully in agreement to resolve this case, so they just have to talk to the judge, and we'll revisit this issue in the court together. In other words, they're working together right now. There is no case. There is no issue anymore. Judge Torres is just being a total stickler. Anyways, that is it for the video, folks. If you enjoyed it, be sure to subscribe to the channel and also head on over to bullrunners.com/altcoin secrets. You can find the link in the description or the pinned comment directly below. Make sure it's from the Bull Runners to unlock the 23 secrets to becoming a crypto millionaire and pinpoint the next explosive altcoins. I put a lot of work into this book for you guys, and I share virtually everything I know about picking cryptos and doing your research before they pop off. And all you have to do is enter your email so that can get sent directly to your inbox. Thanks so much for watching the video, my friend. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Till next time, goodbye.